Good morning. It's June 17th, 2022, Friday, end of the week, finally. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standard's daily live show. We run Monday to Friday, 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard until about 1 o'clock. And we always have lots to cover. I like seeing everybody jumping in there. Ian, Claudette, Pamela, all you guys in the comment scroll. Take advantage of the comment scroll. Have some conversation, interactivity. It's appreciated. It reminds me that there really are people on the other end of that camera out there watching this. And it helps keep the show fluid and lively. Throw those questions out there, those comments, discuss things with each other even. Again, as always, though, try and keep it fairly civil with each other. We don't have to get on each other's cases too badly, even if we're taking these things very seriously. I've got a good show coming up today. We've got Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He's been on a number of times, but he's always got a lot of good common sense to share with us. And we'll discuss a few things, including, the Governor General blowing some money I'm going to go on about shortly in my rant, and as well on Chrystia Freeland's plan on spending us all into prosperity somehow. As well, I will have Jay Hill. He's going to come on the show. He's a former member of Parliament. He was there for 17 years, and he was a party whip. And he's just got a lot of background and knowledge and things to talk about with the inside part of politics, the party part of politics. He's got a lot of experience to lend because we got two big leadership races going on right now, and people who don't play within party circles don't necessarily keep good track of that or understand how some of the mechanics work. And having Jay go join us is going to be good and informative on that. All right, let's talk about some of the daily observances before I get to my rant. I like to get everybody to tune in, and get settled in. And this is a good thing to discuss before we get to the hardcore stuff. So we've got the ugliest dog day. Yes, today is the day where we celebrate the ugliest dogs. Oh, we got a pug there. I'm a bulldog owner. My ugly dogs, ugly to most. To me, I think they look beautiful, but it's certainly a matter of perspective. And there's a lot more ugly people than ugly dogs out there, in my view. But all the same, today is the day you celebrate those ugly dogs and give them the love they deserve, guys, even if they're sort of hideous to behold. It's also Global Garbage Man Day. Similar to the janitor day the other day. That's the other trade or, work that gets demonized a lot, actually. People say, oh, you better do this or you'll end up being a garbage man. Hey, I don't know where, how it is everywhere, but I tell you, people, trash collectors in the city of Calgary make some pretty darn good money and have a good pension and get by. There is nothing wrong with getting out there and putting in a solid day's work and dealing with people's trash. So today's the day to recognize that garbage man or woman or whomever else. Give them a thumbs up. They're out doing what they can. It keeps your front steps from stinking, keeps the flies down, and they got a tough job. All right, let's get on with what's got me worked up today. And yes, it's time to defund the Governor General. How long do we have to keep spending millions to enable a series of pompous, appointed ribbon cutters to shamelessly waste our tax dollars on frivolous luxuries? When are we going to put our foot down and defund the outdated and almost insulting institution of the Governor General in Canada? Governor General Julie Payette, for example, resigned in disgrace just a little over a year ago after a tumultuous 3.5 years as Governor General. Her term was marked by entitlement, extravagant waste, staff abuse, and I would say even laziness. Payette caused issues early in her role when she whined about having to move her schedule in June of 2018 in order to sign a bill into law. Signing bills into law is literally her most important role, but she didn't like troubling herself with it. Payette liked the attention she garnered as Governor General, but chafed under the actual tasks and obligations, and she was engaged in constant battles with the government as she tried to reduce her workload in that first year. Payette did dive into design and renovations as a hobby, though, as her small palace at Rideau Hall was, she pissed away $140,000 tax dollars to study having a new staircase built. And why did she need this new private staircase? Well, because she wanted to be able to navigate through that hall without actually coming into contact with any of the unwashed who sometimes pass through the building on tours and visitors. Yeah. The final straw came when Payette when it was exposed how she'd been chronically abusive with her staff and that working on her entourage was proving to be one of the most toxic jobs to be had in Ottawa. She was just a nasty, nasty person. The history of taxpayer waste by Governor Generals, though, is long and storied. Think of former CBC personality, Adrienne Clarkson. She was notorious with her high spending in the role. On one single tour to Arctic nations, Clarkson blew $5 million tax dollars. Not a huge dent in her nearly $20 million annual budget at the time, though. Clarkson billed, and still bills, $100,000 a year for office expenses. Yeah, still now. And she's soaked taxpayers for office expenses for over $1 million since she retired. This is on top of the massive pension she gets, of course. You see, a lot of people don't know this, but every governor general gets an expense account on the taxpayers for the rest of their life. And it's not that they should need it. They're paid nearly $300,000 a year. And while they're in office, they have every expense from housing to clothing to travel, all paid for by the taxpayers. Their salary pretty much just goes right into the bank. Now, Justin Trudeau appointed Mary Simon to the role of Governor General almost a year ago, and it appears she's embraced the role of largesse, waste, and entitlement quickly. On a trip to the Middle East last March, Simon and her entourage managed to rack up a $93,000 bill, $93,000, just for catering on the military jet she used for the trip. While I can understand the Governor General needn't suffer through a long flight with little more than a tiny bag of roasted peanuts to sustain herself, as the commoners do, I would think she could have fed her entourage at less than $3,000 a head. Now, technically, the Governor General is Canada's head of state, the most powerful person in the country. No legislation can actually pass without the approval of the Queen's representative. In reality, though, the role's evolved into nothing beyond a ceremonial one. If a Governor General actually refused to sign a bill into law, it would be the day we'd start working towards becoming a republic rather than a constitutional monarchy. Perhaps that wouldn't be a bad move, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. We currently have a woke federal government that panders to extreme activists who refer to Canadians as settlers and demand decolonization, whatever that means. Ironically, though, the greatest symbol we have of colonialism and settlement is the office of the Governor General. It indicates we're still beholden and subservient to a foreign power. It would take a complete constitutional revamping to get rid of the office of the Governor General, and I don't see that happening. We can cut the budget to the bone, though. Would it be impossible to find a person to sit in the role of handshakes and ceremonies for a salary of $200,000? I suspect we'd still find many applicants. Do we really need to give them a budget of over $20 million a year in order to travel the world? I don't think the world really cares who our Governor General is, and they'll be okay if they don't see them. Do they need a veritable army of staff and attendants? We can maintain the role respectfully while cutting it down to a shadow of what it's become. A Governor General with a modest budget and attention might be able to remain humble rather than declaring themselves as some form of Canadian royalty. It's a slap in the face for Canadians struggling to pay the bills to watch a member of appointed royalty globetrotting while feeding their friends $3,000 meals on the plane. If we want to indulge the defund movement, let's start at the top. Defund the Governor General. All right, that's what's got me going today. Let's check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what's happening in other news. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going very well, Cory. As
Good.
Baldrick used to say in the old Blackadder series, I have a cunning plan. So you know I'm being tormented by this chickadee, right?
Yes.
You've just got a delivery of 10,000 bees.
I did.
So why don't you put your bees back in their travel box, come bring them over to my place, unleash them underneath my tree to send the chickadees away. And because they're homing bees, they'll just fly right back to your hive in Prentice, won't they?
I don't know if it's that simple, but you know, as we've established, I am still a coward and I'm terrified of bees. It took a lot for me just to get those things into their hive. I don't know if I could make it all the way out there. You might have to come pick some up.
Well, okay, maybe we can do that. But I would, but you don't have any beekeeping gloves anymore because Duke the Wonder Dog ate them.
I think it was Volstagg, the other one we're fostering, but it's hard to say. Both of them are prime suspects in the crime. So yes, my beekeeping gloves now have no baby finger. So with that Dr. Evil baby finger, might be all swollen and bloated on Monday if I get stung there before getting new gloves. Those dogs are driving us nuts.
Okay, well, the obvious question, Cory, is like, after they eat your sandwiches, after they eat your homework, why did you leave your gloves in an area where they could get them?
Oh, there's only so much house I can hide them in.
Well, we got some good news already on the website and more to come, Cory. We've got the first poll in the UCP leadership race out today via Angus Reid, showing its neck-and-neck race at the moment between Brian Jean and Danielle Smith. Smith with 24% of the voters' support, Jean with 23%, and the only other one above 10% is Travis Taves, and I think he's coming in at 13%. So early days yet, Cory, but it looks like a two-horse race at the moment. Significant development in Europe today, where the European Union has given approval for the Ukraine to join them if certain conditions are met. And of course, Crazy Vlad not happy with that. Our Eva Sudwick has the story on his reaction. Our Arthur Green has got a report. Got a great story actually on a Prince Rupert gentleman who's a huge collector of Marvel comics and paraphernalia, memorabilia. He was a victim of a home invasion robbery this week, in which he was hit on the head with a hammer and was stabbed, and really in a fight for his life. And his wonder dog, Baloo, Rottweiler, chased the bad guys away and even bit one of them. So that's good fun. So we got what else do we got? Oh, we got Air Cadet Captain down in Ottawa charged with sexual offenses against children. And our Linda Slobodian, Manitoba political columnist, is working on charges laid after a multi-year investigation into a residential school out there. A 92-year-old priest has been charged with sexual offenses against a 10-year-old girl at the time. So that'll be coming up shortly, and lots of other good stuff I can't tip you off to at the moment.
Great. Well, lots on the go, lots leading into the weekend. So, well, we'll look forward to it as it comes out. And, well, may the next rainstorm knock your chickadee population down.
I'm not hopeful, Cory. I need something.
All right. Thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you later.
Have a good weekend, Cory.
All right. So, yes, lots on the go. And this is when I like to remind everybody. I posted a picture earlier, actually, on Twitter. If people follow me on there, Cory B. Morgan, if you really want to get the fights going with me, that's the place where I like to have it out. But it was a picture of all the gear laid out. Nico's been hard at work. We have a bunch of camera gear, microphones, all that sort of stuff. We're expanding across the country for our reporters, giving them better media packages so they can really get that unique content out there and get it to you guys. And the reason we're expanding, the reason we got so many reporters is because you guys have been subscribing. So thank you to the thousands of people who have subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed already, guys, get on board. $99 a year, $10 a month if you're just going month by month. And this is how we stay as independent media. This is how we can keep getting those reporters, keep getting that unique content, keep getting those columnists. There's that picture. Kind of looks a little strange there with all those big bags. But yeah, it's got cameras, tripods, microphones, data cards, all of that stuff. So we will be bringing more and more to you. And you don't have to rely on that wretched legacy media such as the CBC or CTV or any of those ones who are basically beholden to the government. So again, thank you to those who subscribed. And if you haven't already, get on board, guys. And hey, if you're looking to advertise, that's the other way. I'll go into ads later, but reach out to me. Get your brand or product on the show or get it on the website. We're capitalists. This is how we can keep these things rolling. As Marilyn mentioned in the comments, yes, so looks like the debate is back on. It's a scaled-down version. So the Western Standard was going to host a debate. It was going to be a very large affair. We were going to have the works of them out here. One of the candidates pulled out. It led to some problems, and we had to defer or basically cancel it. But now there's a new one scheduled, and it will be held without that candidate at the Petroleum Club on July 8th. So it'll be in the afternoon. It's a Friday afternoon during Stampede Week. And right now it's $25 a ticket. You can get there. And plus there'll be a cocktail period afterwards where you could rub shoulders with and meet some of those candidates perhaps and chat and listen to them, where it's going to be a Western-focused debate. Of course, it's the Western Standard. So we're going to talk about a lot of those local issues, things that are important to us. So sorry, I let those comments distract me. I'll respond to you in a minute, Jet. So yes, the debate's on. Have a look on the website there, the Western Standard. You can buy your tickets. I guess half of them are already sold out. So, for $25, it's a good afternoon at the Petroleum Club. You can have a look around in that storied establishment in downtown Calgary. Anyways, it's kind of a cool club. So, okay, yeah. So, Jet, yeah, you're pointing out that picture looks like a drug bust. Yeah, all those brown bags for holding all the media gear and everything. But you want to be nondescript when you're going out on location in spots like that. So, bright branded things can get dirty, or they can attract negative attention from people, or a lot of things. But all the same, it was just a picture showing a large amount of gear as we are indeed expanding. Claudette's asking if we'll be live streaming, and so Sylvia, yes, we will stream that debate from up there. We're still setting up all those details and everything now. It comes pretty fast, sneaking up on you when you're planning on things, and we will be running it. If you can't get there in person, it'll be live streamed. So let me see here. I will run into a quick ad break before we get to our first guest. He'll be coming in a little while. And that's Bitcoin Well. That is a good Alberta company. We're talking local. We're talking reliable. These guys are publicly traded. As you can see, they got ATMs all across Canada. They take digital currencies and they make them practical and safely. That's the big thing. I mean, I can't speak to, the values of digital currencies and where they go up and down, things like that, or stocks. But the thing is, it's like they're the broker. They're the ones to help move you through. I think broker is a term you're not supposed to use with it. But Bitcoin Well, if you're looking to get involved with it, check them out, guys. It gives you all of that information on what you can do with Bitcoin, how you can get yourself set up with it, and safely participate in the digital currency world. Check them out, bitcoinwell.com. And as they say, take control of your money. So let me see what else we got here. Here's a story I might as well start on with. The government is hiring private censors, yes, at $39 million, where they already hired them. So agencies in the last 2 years spent $39 million to hire private contractors to censor documents. That's how much they're hiding from us. They got to spend almost $40 million to get a small army of people to censor documents, to redact and sift through and shred and make sure we in the public never actually know what they're doing for us or with our money. And that's censoring the documents sought by Canadians under the Access to Information Act. Access to information, it should be a principle. As far as I'm concerned, every government document should be automatically public unless they can come up with a reason otherwise. I mean, there's some things, private payroll things, some confidential things if you're doing some business, certainly some military or intelligence things, okay. But for the most part, no, it's our data. It's our information. We should know, it should be wide open. We shouldn't have to come begging and groveling, putting in access to information requests, pushing, prodding to try and get these things. And this is their excuses too. Each file is different based on the complexity and volume of pages. Oh, spare me. Look at how things are now, digitally. I mean, you can search out anything online in nearly no time. It's not like the old days if you were looking for legislative or parliamentary records where somebody would have to go into some deep archives and dig out physical pieces of equipment or data or anything like that. It's very easy. You don't even need paper anymore. They don't have to mail it to you anymore. They don't have to make copies of it anymore. All those excuses for why they're making freedom of information so difficult to get at and so expensive to get at. There's no excuses anymore, you guys. It should all be there. It should be wide open. Yet they're spending $39 million to basically work on hiding this stuff from us. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And that's where our money is going. I mean, good work if you can get it. I guess the consultants were hired to reduce the backlog. I mean, see, you got to remember, this is on top of all of the staff, already dedicated to this on your dime, the full-time permanent civil servants and employees who are in there. It's above and beyond that. So the other thing you got to wonder about, so yeah, there's a bunch of firms. I mean, one firm got $16 million almost for this. I wonder how much, connections we have and who knows who to get those contracts. It's pretty good work if you can get it, eh? All right, let's see here. Jet Gorgon saying his City Hall said $10,000 for a Freedom of Information request to get expense info for council. And I know there was one, I can't remember what it was. The Western Standard did one and they offered us a bill of like $15,000. It was just absurd. That's their way of saying, we're not going to share it with you. We're not going to. And even if we were crazy enough or had that money laying around, which we might be a little crazy, but we don't have that kind of money laying around, and did push and get those sort of documents out of them when they're that hesitant, you know what'll happen? They'll send you something out that is so heavily redacted that you'd get none of the information you really wanted to in the first place. So transparency, that's just a buzzword. These guys just have no respect for us as taxpayers and the people who actually should be telling them what to do. All right, let's get somebody who's trying to tell them what to do on, though, and that's our guest, Franco Terrazzano with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He's got a good head of steam up this week. There's been lots of stuff to talk about and expose. They always give no shortage of material to work with, I'm afraid, at the government. How's it going, Franco?
Hey, Cory, I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm not $80,000 on in-flight catering good, but I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I saw. Oh, that's right. Actually, I should have corrected that. They brought it down. They claim now that it was only $80,000 for the catering on the flight rather than $93,000, right?
Well, Cory, this is ridiculous. I mean, the government is off by $13,000. So first, let's just start with the tab. I mean, now they're saying it's $80,000 on in-flight catering. I mean, that is a huge tab in and of itself. But hold on a second here. Originally, they said 93,000. Now they're saying 80,000. Cory, I'm saying I don't trust you. Show us the receipts. Let's see exactly what the receipts say. Let's see exactly what was spent. Because, Cory, how in the world is the Governor General and her fellow passengers even managing to spend $80,000 on in-flight catering? And if they're spending that much on in-flight catering, how much are they actually spending once they get to the destinations on things like food, hotel, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, and this was only, just to clarify for people too, 29 people on this flight. We're not talking a big 747 that, well, it probably was a big plane, but it didn't have 400, 500 people on there. Man, you got to work pretty hard to consume that much on a flight or a couple of flights.
You know, we broke down the numbers. You want to know what you could buy for $80,000? 22 pounds of beluga caviar, or 1,100 orders of filet mignon and lobster tail from the steak. Or get this one, Cory. This one might reminisce a little bit more with you. 6,800 Big Mac meals from McDonald's. So you could buy a ton with $80,000. Really, this is why we need to see the receipts. What did you actually spend the money on? We need to see a full detailed list of the receipts. And as I said earlier, Cory, it's not just about the in-flight catering anymore. I think $80,000 warrants a full shining of the light to see what the total bill for this trip costs.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, that's just the one portion of it. I mean, what was it? This was something in my earlier rant I brought up with Adrienne Clarkson and her $5 million tour of Arctic countries 20 years ago or 15 years ago or so. It got everybody worked up, but it seems we just forget about these things with these governors general. And as Claudette, one of our commenters, pointed, is that the amount with alcohol? Well, we don't know because they haven't broken it down yet. But I imagine there's some nice single malt scotches mixed among there and some things.
Cory, you think there was more stuff spent on than just pretzels? How could that be true, right? But unfortunately, I think you're really hitting the nail on the head. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Governor General waste, right? We know that there's this expense program that all former governors general are entitled to that allows them to expense taxpayers for more than $200,000 every single year for the rest of their life, and up to 6 months after their death, their estate can still continue to bill taxpayers. Again, this is for former governor generals, so after they retire, they're still able to expense taxpayers. And perhaps what is so frustrating about this is that Trudeau knows that this program exists. He spent $20,000 reviewing this program. The review was done in 2019, and since then, he's just sat on his hands. He hasn't done anything about it.
Well, I mean, that's a good one to point out. I mean, just how insane this is. They can reach out from the grave and posthumously screw the taxpayers for even 6 months after they stop drawing breath. They still manage to hoop us for as much as $100,000.
Yeah, and I got another one for you. The expense account is bad. This one could be even worse. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to arm wrestle about it. But it's the pensions that these governors general get. We call it the Julie Payette pension problem, because a governor general is eligible for the full taxpayer pension regardless of how long they serve. So you have the example of former Governor General Julie Payette, who served for a little bit more than 3 years, but she is still eligible to collect an estimated $4 million through the pension if she continues to collect it to the age of 90. So served for a few years, and she could still be eligible to collect millions and millions of dollars through her pension. Cory, there are 5 former governors general that are still living. If they all continue to collect the pension to age 90, for 5 of them, it'll cost taxpayers over $18 million.
Well, I guess maybe in some ways they'll save us some money if they're eating a lot of really, butter-filled, high-fat food and drinking a lot of that high-end scotch and champagne on the flights, and they won't live as long due to the unhealthy living and won't cost us as much. I mean, I know I'm joking, but it's just
I knew you were going there.
for what's getting paid for ceremonial positions by people. And Justin Trudeau so recently having, I mean, basically embarrassed himself with the Payette catastrophe. I mean, as a governor general, she went out in scandal. You'd think he'd be more careful, or the next governor general would be more careful to try and avoid this sort of thing. And she hasn't even made it a year yet. And here we go.
Yeah, that was a really good point right there that you ended on, right? We just had a very turbulent relationship with the last governor general. We were hoping for maybe perhaps a new relationship with this governor general, but she's off to a bad start when it comes to disrespecting taxpayers' hard-earned money. You know, there's a few more points that I think we have to talk about, specifically with the $80,000 on in-flight catering. Number one, that happened in March of this year. Okay, so that happened while Canadians were experiencing a 3 decades high inflation. So you have Canadians at home who are having a difficult time fueling up their cars on the way to work, who are having a difficult time trying to afford to put ground beef in the grocery carts, all while our apparent head of state, the governor general, and her entourage are racking up $80,000 in in-flight catering. But here's a second thing that we have to remember, Cory. You know, I travel a lot with work. And it is reasonable that when you're on the road that you can expense your employer for reasonable types of meals, right? If you're on the road, you should be able to expense your employer for a reasonable meal, but not $80,000 on in-flight catering for yourself, your entourage, and whoever might be on the flight. I mean, we have to remember too, is that the governor general, she is making more than $300,000 in her annual salary. So if she wants to have a fancy meal, by all means, she should be able to pay for it out of pocket.
Yeah, they're not starving. And I mean, I said that kind of earlier in my rant. I understand. Okay, they don't necessarily have to endure just going through a whole flight with a pack of peanuts and a water bottle. But I mean, that's just beyond the pale when it's getting to those levels. I don't know what it'll take to fix it, but I'm glad you guys keep exposing it. Getting on to maybe pivoting a bit, though, another big issue this week, and I'm sure you guys have been on, is the inflation effort that Chrystia Freeland is doing. It's just, wow. They don't even know basic economic theory, do they? Or did they just not care?
Well, that is the $1 trillion question, isn't it, Cory? Now, before I get into the inflation announcement, I just want to talk about the irony listening to the finance minister talking about so-called fiscal restraint from the government when the governor general is under a scandal for expensing $80,000 on in-flight catering. Do you see the irony there, where you have the finance minister talking about fiscal restraint and then the governor general and her entourage milking taxpayers on in-flight catering? But Cory, let's talk about the substance. $8.9 billion is this so-called plan to help improve the cost of living. Well, you have Freeland who's talking about affordability, but Canadians are having a tough time fueling up their cars, filling up their grocery carts, because this government has been spending like crazy for years and raising taxes. And what is this government doing lately? Well, it just raises carbon tax for the third time during COVID-19. It just raised alcohol taxes for the third time during the pandemic. It's raising payroll taxes again this year. And now we are seeing more and more spending. So what is causing this inflation, the government is just doubling down on. So Cory, it's almost like Freeland is trying to put out this inflation fire by dumping gasoline all over it.
Yeah, and again, as I said, you know, I mean, not everybody reads up on economics. It's a bit dry, but some of the most basic principles, I mean, it applies to currencies even. It's supply and demand. If you borrow, it means you got to increase the supply. If government does, I mean, they've got to crank out the currency, flood the market with it. It becomes worth less, and then you get inflation. I mean, this is just the basics of economics. A finance minister should be well aware of this. Yet,
well, the more dollars the government's Bank of Canada prints, the less that your dollars in your bank account or your savings account will buy. And the Bank of Canada has had its printing press on overdrive during the pandemic. It printed more than $300 billion, Cory, right out of thin air. And what do you think happens when you print $300 billion out of thin air and drop it right into the economy when you have the government locking people down and paying people not to work? What happens is that you create the perfect storm for inflation, where you have too many dollars chasing too few goods. That is exactly what the government of Canada has done, creating the perfect storm for inflation. And now Freeland is really adding more fuel to the inflation fire with more spending, with more debt. Well, how are we going to finance all of this spending? How are we going to pay down all this debt? What we need to see the government do is to stop what it has been doing, which is creating this inflation, right? Rein in the years of overspending, chip away at the $1 trillion debt, and for heaven's sake, give taxpayers some much needed relief.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's, fighting inflation by borrowing almost $9 billion. It's like fighting weight gain by doubling the amount of ice cream you eat every month. It's just not going to work. Your strategy is rather stupid, to be honest. But that seems to be all they know how to do.
Well, you're right. It seems like this government's only plan is just to spend buckets of taxpayers' cash. When times are tough, they spend a ton of money. When times are good before the pandemic, they spend a ton of money. When the economy is inflating, what do? You guessed it, they spend a ton of money. This is the only so-called plan that we have heard from this Trudeau government. But let's just look at the history here, right? We saw Trudeau back in, I think, 2014, so the budget would balance itself. Well, I mean, still waiting on that. Just checking my watch. We heard in 2015, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he would balance the budget by 2019. He missed that target by a country mile before the pandemic. Now, the books say that we wouldn't get a balanced budget until 2070 under the current trajectory. So this spend, deficit, it's not working. It's one of the reasons that we're seeing this 3 decades high inflation. And we really need to see this government reverse its course, or Canadians are going to continue to get gouged in just the cost of living going up.
Yeah, well, with that latest plan, let's see. So if I manage to make it to the age of 99, I might actually see a balanced budget in Canada, assuming they hold the course where they are right now.
Yeah, and assuming you don't double down on those ice creams too, Cory.
So there's just been no discussion whatsoever of cutting anything, though, has there? I mean, they talk about everybody else tightening their belts. They talk about how it's tough times, but there's nowhere where they've trimmed, is there?
Oh, no. What we've seen from this government is essentially spend more money on everything forever. Now, we hear a lot of people say, well, we just had a pandemic. Didn't the government have to increase spending the way it did? Well, I think we can all arm wrestle on the specifics, but let's take a high level view here. When you have a family, when you have a business that is going through tough times, families and businesses understand that, okay, redirect resources, maybe spend more money on one area of the budget, but cut back on other areas of the budget. That is the approach that the federal government should have taken. That is not what the federal government did. We didn't see any prioritization. We just saw more and more and more spending. Now, fast forward to today, the government wants to spend about $450 billion this year. That's $90 billion more than it was spending pre-pandemic. And here's why that matters. Before the pandemic, the Trudeau government was spending all-time highs. Meaning in 2018, the Trudeau government spent more money than the federal government did during any single year during World War II, even after accounting for inflation and population differences. So before the pandemic, you had the government spending all-time highs. Now the government wants to spend $90 billion more than that. And the finance minister somehow has the audacity to tell Canadians that the government is bringing in fiscal restraint. What fiscal restraint? By all measures, we have not seen any fiscal restraint from this government yet.
Well, all we can do is keep pushing on them. Hopefully some of the wiser minds, quiet, hiding in the background of the Liberal Party, start speaking up maybe and change some things, and I guess keep the pressure on. So, before we close, where can people find more information on what you guys are up to and what you're doing? I mean, maybe you'll finally get the breakdown of what happened on that flight and share it somewhere.
Oh, we definitely, we're going to keep snooping around for that. We've already filed in the ATIPs, the Freedom of Information request, to get the actual breakdown. But please head over to taxpayer.com. Check out our newsroom tab where you can find all of our articles. We've got a bunch of great petitions that you can sign there. Of course, follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Just search Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
Great. Well, always good to have you on, Franco. I appreciate the work and sharing that with us, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Cory, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Right on. That was Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. As I said, if nothing else, the Trudeau government just gives them nothing. But, I think the hardest part working over there must be which horrific incidents do you have the time to share and put up top, because you got so many to choose from. It's just so insulting in tough times to see these elitists, and that's what they are, pointing it out. And, I don't like playing the politics of envy. And that's not what it is. Elitists, I mean, these are people who feel they're entitled by whatever basis, you know, whether God-given or who knows what. If a person earns their money, makes piles of it, and lives excessively and conspicuously consuming things, good for them. Good for them. I'm fine with that. I don't care. That's their business. But when they're taking my money and telling me to tighten my belt, particularly such an authoritarian government, and just wasting it like that, just wasting it. I can't wait to find out how that breaks down. As we said, so, okay, now apparently it's 80,000. It's kind of hard to believe anything out of these guys. Even then, okay, 80,000 among 29 people for catering on a flight. What do you have to buy? I mean, as Franco was pointing out, you know, pounds and pounds and pounds of beluga caviar or things like that. I want to find out, because there's either just gross efforts to overspend on what they were doing, like just an orgy of consumption of our money, or there's fraud. And in either case, I think this is cause already to fire this latest governor general. But again, I mean, even if you won the lotto and you're spending money and you want to treat a bunch of 29 family members to an overseas trip on a private plane, you're going to pay for catering. Okay. How much do you need to spend? 80,000? I mean, like I said, I used to like Scotch back when I could drink. A good Scotch, you can get a good single malt, you can get a passable one for $40 or $50 bottle. You can get a really good one for 80 or 90, 100. But I mean, there is no ceiling on Scotches. So you can go way up and you could be spending thousands a bottle if you want. Is that what she did? Is that what they had? You know, same thing with wine. You can get a very good bottle of wine for $20. You can get an exceptional bottle of wine for 60. And it's not always, the price doesn't even dictate necessarily whether it's the best one. But you know, there's some very modestly priced wines that are very good, or beers. So how the hell are they spending that much? Were they seeking out, again, food-wise? You know, likewise, he said, you know, you could have like 1,000 filet mignons or something for what they were talking about. Like, what did these guys do with our money? And that's just the catering. What else did they spend on? What was their budget for accommodations? How much fuel did they burn on this trip? Did they even need to do this trip? And that's just one drop in a giant bucket of ongoing, constant waste, abuse. You know, the disrespect for us. They really hold us in contempt. They do. They don't care. They don't care what we think. They don't care how hard we work for what we have. They don't care about our individual rights. We saw that with the Emergencies Act. There's just this core of elitists that feel entitled to what you've worked for, and they won't hesitate to waste it. They're shameless, and it's just infuriating. You know, how many years, how many times do we have to see this story over and over and over again with this person? And as I said in my rant, you know, the irony, just the way they put these things too. Oh, we're going to pander to this decolonial movement and all that. What do you think a governor general is? She's the last actual paid remnant of colonialism. We blame, or not we, but the woke like blaming anything and everything on colonialism and this and that. Yet they shut up when it comes to the bloody governor general for some reason. That's exactly what she is. We're the colony of Canada, and she's the one who signs off on behalf of the Queen. And apparently she can't fly with 29 friends without blowing $80,000 to $93,000 just on the catering. Doesn't it make it feel good when you're sweating on how you're going to pay your rent or the mortgage or the car, or try to save some money for your own retirement? When, yeah, as Franco pointed out, not only do they rob us their whole time while they're in office, and then they get a massive pension after they leave the office, as Payette did, even 3.5 years in, she gets this pension that's going to be worth millions if she lives a long time. And then they can expense, as Adrienne Clarkson did. How on earth does a governor general need expenses if they're 10 years out of the job, office expenses? But she did over $100,000 a year. She was soaking us well out of the job. She soaked us for over $1 million expenses after leaving the office. And then Franco pointing out that they can still do it 6 years after they're dead. What position on the planet do you get to actually rob taxpayers from the grave even when you're dead? They're still screwing us. We can't escape these guys even when they take their dirt nap. And this country is screwed up and broken. At least it gives me lots to work on. All right, I'm going to speak quickly on a sponsor, and then we'll bring in our guest. I'm sure he can have some horror stories on waste and things too from his time in Ottawa and in Parliament, but we'll talk about one more functional things, I guess, when we get Jay on here. But I do want to talk about the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. They've been a very good sponsor for us for quite some time now. And I mean, again, their name says exactly what they're about. If you like firearms, you enjoy them, whether you collect them or target, shoot, or hunt, any of the uses that millions of Canadians legally do, safely do, harmlessly do with firearms, this is the group to join. You know, this is the place to go as a responsible firearm owner. I mean, they have all sorts of resources, videos, things on how you can safely enjoy firearms, target shooting competitions, black powder things. There's no end to it. It's a great hobby. This is where you associate with other firearm owners. It's an association. Get to know them, chat with them, share resources. Check it out. You got to do that. Plus, of course, they're lobbying on your behalf because we have a government that is trying to take away your right and ability to use these firearms. And they're not going to stop unless we push back. I mean, the only way you can guarantee a loss is not to try. And these guys have been working very hard to protect your rights, but they need you to take part too. So get on there, check them out. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Take out a membership. It's not much. It's a good service for yourself, and it's how you can protect your right and ability to keep enjoying firearms. CSSA-CILA.org. All right. Let's see, enough fuming on taxpayers and firearms. Let's talk to, we've got in studio, Mr. Jay Hill. Though admittedly, we did pay your salary for a long time in Ottawa as well. But you were critical, at least, of the spending while you were there as a reformer and all the way up to a recent retirement. So welcome back to the studio. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Cory. Thanks for inviting me back.
Oh, it's always good. And we got so much going on, you know, and I just, as I said, I appreciate having your voice of experience to lend to things. I don't want to, you know, make too many comments about age necessarily. Experience.
That's very kind of you. I caught the tail end of your rant, and I thought you were right on the money. I think that the average Canadian and Albertan, since we're mainly speaking to Albertans here, is that just appalled at this latest example of government waste on the part of the Governor General.
Yeah, and it just never stops. I mean, one of the commenters, Richard Blackburn, saying, you know, one Governor General after Governor General, yet we just keep doing it. Like it's, we get mad every few years, we forget about it, we just put another one in, and we keep repeating, you know, rinse, wash, repeat.
Well, and I think that increasingly, certainly those people in Western Canada that pay attention to what's going on in Ottawa have to question why there's no criteria, and, you know, that you can measure people against when the Prime Minister appoints the Governor General or senators. You know, clearly there should be something as a job description and something that we can sort of judge them by.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a senator, even that there's some potential roles or things that they could, you know, be doing in power. But I mean, realistically, a Governor General now is a figurehead. I mean, it's an important one, technically a very powerful person. But I said kind of in an earlier rant at the start of the show, I bet we could find somebody for half of that salary who could do it very well, a good public speaker, a presenter who could represent and you know, give out the medals and cut the ribbons, because that's really what they do.
Yeah. I'm sure there's lots of highly qualified people. I think the worst recent example, and you mentioned her on your show, is Payette. You know, obviously, I don't know what screening took place before the Prime Minister Trudeau appointed her, but obviously it was inadequate.
Oh, yeah. And I was ranting earlier about that. I mean, because even in her first year, she was complaining about her job. I mean, that's what really got me worked up. I was researching for my rant, and I found one of my old blog posts from a few years ago, me going after her then, because, wow, you're making $300,000 a year with all your expenses, everything else. And you're saying, I quit making me come in to sign these bills. It's tiring. I don't want to have to do all this. Yeah, exactly. Oh, you poor darling. Oh, well, I'll get on to some other stuff. I've been ranting on that for a while. We've got perhaps some opportunities for change. I kind of want to talk about, we got two Conservative parties in leadership races right now. I mean, they're going to obviously be very important for the parties, hopefully very important for the country and the province, depending on who wins it. The federal race is kind of dragging. It's going to be a long one, you know. I mean, it's already been going for quite a while, and it's going into September. They're all positioning themselves. The memberships have closed now. How do you think that's looking? Like, where is that going right now?
Well, I think that there's general concern, certainly in Western Canada, whether Pierre Poilievre can actually win. He's certainly got a strong, base of support here in the West. It's ironic, I guess, that at least at this point, he hasn't accepted the invitation from Western Standard to participate in the debate that the paper has organized. And so we'll see where that goes. I mean, all the other, 5 5 of the candidates have all accepted the invitation to.
Well, 4 now.
participate.
We're working on it, and
Yeah.
and there's part of the problems I think that happens in politics. A bit of it's strategic. We see that a lot, as often with a front runner or a incumbent. We know that from town hall meetings or election forums. When it comes, they often will decline on those because they realize, well, we don't feel that there's a lot that can be gained, but if we get in there and screw up, there's a lot we can lose.
Exactly.
So
And that's sort of the traditional position of the front runner. And obviously Pierre and his supporters consider him to be the front runner. So as you say, they have to weigh that balance about, the risk, whether you can gain sufficient to take that risk is really what it comes down to. And as front runner, they often will decline these invitations because of that. So, we'll have to see how this develops. It's an interesting race, I guess, as a conservative. Lifelong reformer / Canadian Alliance / conservative member of parliament. Obviously, I have an interest in seeing how that develops. But I guess we could talk about what comes next. That's what you and I were discussing previously on your program, is for most Albertans and Canadians, I think you have to look beyond the existing race. Okay, so it's fine to win the race and become the leader of that party, whether it's the Conservative Party of Canada, the CPC nationally, or the United Conservative Party, the UCP, provincially. It's fine to win the race, but what comes next? How well positioned are they to take that next big, hopefully victory as a conservative? I'd say hopefully victory, and win either as premier or as prime minister.
Yeah, it's a big task, and it's a different type of task. It's a different strategy. Winning among ostensibly conservative members, you can say a lot of the good conservative language to get in there.
Yeah.
Next, if you're trying for the general populace, well, if we're going to follow our ideals, you would stick to your conservative message and you'll sell it well enough to enough Canadians that they will embrace it. What often happens, though, is they get in and then they say, well, the only way I can win now is to expand the base by going more liberal.
Yeah.
And, but that's failed for 2 candidates in a row.
Yeah. Well, hopefully whoever wins doesn't go that route. That, as you say, they try to sell a conservative message to Toronto, Montreal, and points east, as opposed to trying to change the party. And of course, that was the big problem that many Westerners in particular had with Mr. O'Toole, is he no sooner won the leadership of the Conservative Party as he started to say, well, conservatives have to change. It's not that people down east had to change to a more conservative philosophy, if you will. It was that the party and the membership was expected to change. And that didn't sit very well with a lot of conservatives, particularly here in the West.
No, and it does seem to be the cycle of battle, though, right? And then the conservative members, we are the most notorious for ripping out our own leaders. We're unforgiving when they tick us off.
Yeah.
And that's happened to the last 2 leaders in a row. They were pulled down from their own. Same with Premier Kenny.
Yeah.
So, they have to manage to, as you said, the big what if after they win. Okay, they got a couple of big tasks. Not only do they have to try and win an election, they still got to keep those members happy too while they're at it, whether it's caucus or at a ground level. And it's quite a juggling act.
I have given this a considerable thought in the last while, as I suspect a lot of Canadians are, when we look at the National Party, the CPC's leadership race, because people are saying, well, at the moment, Pierre Poilievre has a very strong conservative base. When I say conservative, fiscal conservatism, even in many respects, social conservatism. He seems to be appealing, as Mr. O'Toole did, to that hardcore base. And so then people have been saying to me, based upon my experience, say, well, how would he morph, as you're suggesting, Cory, how would he morph to actually be in a position to win the prime ministership? And I've been saying, well, there's a number of factors that might work in his favor were he to win. Is he actually the front runner, first of all? And then secondly, under this goofy system they have of the equality of all ridings, regardless of the size of the membership, can he actually win? And, that remains to be seen on September 10th. But my point is that you and I, because we do have some gray hair, we know that in most cases, governments are defeated. They're not elected. And by that, I mean that they all have a lifespan, if you will. And at some point, the electorate gets tired of them. And that'll happen, believe it or not, even with Justin Trudeau, I think, and we're starting to see that a little bit in some of the criticism coming out of the mainstream media in the last while. They've been so silent as far as criticizing him, but in the last while, that's starting to change. So is that a sign that Central and Eastern Canada might be becoming a bit more critical of Justin Trudeau and his government? We would hope so. Us in the West would hope so. So timing is everything. Perhaps whether it's Pierre or Mr. Charest or whoever becomes the next Conservative leader, timing might be right. And they might be able to sell a Conservative message, not really because people are embracing that message, but because they're tired of the Liberals and they feel they've had their chance.
They're ready for somebody else. The
Exactly.
opportunity's there. Yeah, and we are seeing that. I mean, I'll name a couple. Yeah, Don Martin came out with just a scathing tear into Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
And Selly was another one, I believe, that, again, very critical and saying maybe as the veneer is coming off, the members are getting tired, the Liberal members are getting tired. So, I mean, it provides opportunity.
Well, we saw with the mandate issue, right? All of the opposition to these travel mandates that has been building and building and building. And yet it appears to be that it took the insiders, I'll call them, the Liberal members of Parliament themselves, where they finally said, enough, this is ridiculous. We're the only country left on the planet, basically, that still has these travel mandates in place. And it took that kind of pressure, internal pressure, before Trudeau eventually said, okay, I'll lift the mandates.
Well, we'll be watching with interest. They've got a lot to work with. But again, you know, as you said, there's two races they got to do, win the leadership and win the election.
Exactly.
Even more immediately pressing, I'll move into the provincial one. So we got quite one developing. I believe now there's 9 candidates announced for this one. We'll see. I'll kind of start though on that bar they set. What's the party signaling when they're saying, you have to come up with $175,000 in 2 months just to run?
Yeah.
That bugs me. I got to admit. I mean, I understand the need for a bar, but setting it that purposely high, I don't think it shows respect for the grassroots.
No, not at all. I would agree 100% with you. The last time I was on your program, we discussed that because we didn't know what the threshold would be at that point. And we also discussed, as I recall, Cory, the challenge that whoever runs and whoever wins and becomes our next premier by default, because, you know, at least for a few months, they'll be premier and hopefully longer. You know, the challenges that they have. And one of those challenges, I believe, is to try to convince people that they're not elitists, that they're not insiders, and they will not govern like Jason Kenney did, or he allegedly did, which is that, you know, it was his way or the highway. He only consulted apparently with a very small number of people, sort of his core group of 2 or 3 advisors, didn't even listen to his own cabinet or his caucus. You know, and I think that was really what eventually inflamed the rank and file membership of the United Conservative Party against Mr. Kenney, was this, whether it's right or not, the perception, and in politics, perception is reality, the perception that he wasn't listening to anybody but a few insiders. And so the challenge will be for all of these candidates, especially the cabinet ministers, especially former leaders like Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, to convince Albertans at large, not just the UCP membership, convince Albertans at large that they can broaden their base, that they will listen to the people as opposed to a few key insiders. So
yeah, and I mean, that's something we used to, you know, pride ourselves as reformers way back in the time. The fundraising numbers were always great because it showed it was $10 here, it was $50 there, it was a KFC bucket passed at a town hall meeting or a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And it was still, it added up to a lot of money. People really, you know, reached deeply and funded that party and that movement as it went. And thousands of people did. But with this bar set and the timeline, it means no matter who gets into this race, it means they had a few very heavy duty donors in order to pull it off. They just don't have the time to build that network of grassroots support. But then it's hard to sell yourself then when clearly you're at least a little beholden to 5 or 6 heavy duty donors or action groups or something of this sort in order to get in it. It's just an unfortunate way they went.
I couldn't agree more. And, you know, there again, the last time I was on your program a couple of weeks back, we were talking about that. We were talking about the advantage for the party and certainly for the individual to have somebody that's widely viewed as an outsider, a bridge builder, we used to call them in the Reform Party, somebody that could appeal to all, like urban and rural, was as comfortable in a boardroom talking to businessmen in Calgary or Edmonton as he or she would be, standing with some crap on their boots in a farmyard, and someone that could appeal to all age groups, which would by necessity probably mean not myself, not a gray-haired fella. We need somebody that can appeal to the next generation because it's them that's facing a lot of the challenges today.
Yeah, and I don't fault the candidates. They weren't a part of the committee. So those who were entering and those who managed to make it, they did what they have to do to get in. Richard Blackburn saying, yeah, he agrees it's high, but, you have to have something in place, to ensure there aren't 40 candidates. And I agree, but we've always said there should be a bar. But, I've always said like 50 grand. That's a pretty good chunk. Even add another 20 for a deposit on top of that. So we're talking 70. That's pretty sizable. A person isn't casually just going to, especially if they don't think they're going to win it, just throw that out there and jump in. That's still going to keep it down to a number. But it's too late now. I guess it's the way it is. That's the way it's set.
Yeah.
So a little on where they're going, though. So they've been talking things that more of you and I's language, and a lot of regionalism is really coming up right now. Danielle was on the show and she was talking about her Sovereignty Act she's proposing. Brian Jean is talking about Alberta autonomy right on front and center on his campaign. Michelle Rempel's looking to dip her toe in the water, perhaps, and she was again talking about standing up to Ottawa. So we're seeing a much more regionalist flavor from the candidates so far. You think that's going to set as a theme throughout the campaign, or maybe they're getting that out early so they can get to policy later?
Well, I hope it is. And I said that right from the beginning as soon as Mr. Kenney announced that he was going to be stepping down. And, basically that was the start of the replacement race at that time. And I said right away, I hope that every single candidate that eventually runs not only commits to greater autonomy for Alberta and curbing the Ottawa overreach and the infringement on the province's really the basis of our economy. And when we look in particular, of course, the oil and gas industry and what's happened to that because of I would almost call it seems like a personal vendetta on the part of the Prime Minister to destroy our industry. And yet it's the cash cow, it's the golden goose, if you will, that's funding the country. It makes no sense, but then so much of what Justin Trudeau does makes no sense.
Yeah, well, and we're talking with a federal ideologically driven government. They don't listen to common sense. I was talking to Franco Terrazzano from the Taxpayers Federation earlier in the show. And again, we're just stumped. I mean, with Chrystia Freeland, okay, we don't expect much of the Liberal government, but still, I mean, just the most basic thing, is you can't keep spending or you're going to cause inflation. And for her to stand up and say, we're going to spend $9 billion more to fight inflation,
it makes no sense.
So this is not a government we can expect rational behavior from. So even though they're as reliant on oil for their revenues as anybody else is, they're still trying to attack it. They're still trying to knock it down.
Yeah.
Just like Joe Biden saying, oh, it's not my fault that the prices are high throughout North America. And now hold my hat while I go snivel for oil over in Saudi Arabia. And I don't want any more Canadian stuff. It just defies sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think increasingly, hopefully, I say this, increasingly Canadians, in particular Western Canadians, are getting fed up with this hypocrisy on the part of leadership, whether it's in the States or here in Canada. And increasingly people are calling them out on it. And well, they should. I know the one thing that prompted me a couple of years ago, you and I have talked about this, to come out of my retirement at the time and start that new political party, the Maverick Party, was this sense that that I was just fed up with the hypocrisy, where our political leadership, say you and I, as sort of average Canadians, should do such and such, but then they turn around and don't apply those same rules to themselves. And I hope that the apathy that we've seen on the part of a lot of Canadians as they struggle, as you said earlier in the program, to meet their mortgage payments, to put food on the table, fuel in the car in order to go to work, as they struggle under those, that the apathy that we see towards politics will end, and there will be more people involved in things like the Freedom Convoy that say enough, we're fed up.
The apathy tends to go away when you finally get kicked in the butt.
Yeah.
You know, talking about green things, climate emergencies, plans like that. That's all beautiful until you can't pay the rent.
Yeah.
You know, until you can't feed your kids well enough, or choosing between, you know, keeping them well dressed for school or buying a decent food. So I think people will be ready for change if the right person approaches them. So I mean, I think part of this regionalist approach too is, I mean, we're seeing that too from establishment candidates, Taze and others. They're trying to carefully distance themselves from Kenny while not being insulting at the same time. But they do. Every candidate has to explain, why am I different than Kenny? Because he was rejected by the members. I mean, there was no getting around that. And a large part of that was the Fair Deal panel. That was one of the things that really soured me. Like, I was optimistic. Hey, you're going to strike this panel. You're going to go out. The panel comes back with 25 recommendations, all of which I like. And you know what he did? Nothing. Not a damn thing. So I mean, it looks like,
well, in fairness, he held a referendum.
Yes, okay.
But then what happened after that?
Yeah.
After 60-some percent, 63%, I think it was, of Albertans, said, yeah, there's something wrong here. We're voting against equalization as it's presently constituted in Canada, and I think with good reason. That Albertans, especially when you get down to the family unit, are struggling. They were struggling hard then. They're still struggling under the weight of taxes and increasing costs, inflation. You mentioned earlier the idiocy of our federal government, where they spent hundreds of billions of dollars, over the life of this COVID epidemic, what we believed was a COVID epidemic. And, they couldn't make the connection that you spend that kind of money, you push that amount of money into society, you're going to fuel inflation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that the average person, whether they're, a truck driver, a waitress, a farmer, whatever, just the average Canadian out there would say, that makes no sense. I mean, you're going to spend that kind of money, you are going to fuel inflation.
It's just basic economics. I've been just, when I get bored, I search through some of my old tweets from a year or two ago, just to remind people and retweet myself. This is what I said a year and a half ago, guys. We can't keep pretending we didn't see it coming. Everybody kept saying, keep spending like this, we're going to get inflation. And lo and behold, here it is. I love it when I can say I told you so. It's a lot easier when I say, no, shit, I blew it, which I get to say now and then as well.
Yeah, but as you point out, Cory, that even, having the advantage of saying I told you so, it doesn't help us in our present situation. That a lot of people, not just you and I, but a lot of people can look back at what they wrote as a guest column in my case, or journalism in yours, or statements that you've made in the past. That doesn't help today.
Well, what it does help today is we still have time to stop.
Yeah.
You didn't listen a year ago, but we're still spending now, so that the advice still applies. It can get worse.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the UCP leadership. I think the big challenge for some of these candidates is going to do exactly what you just mentioned a minute ago, is to distance themselves from the previous administration. And the cabinet ministers, and in particular, Travis Taves, that is a huge hill for him to climb, to be able to say to, first of all, the UCP membership, and then provided he was successful, then to Albertans, oh, well, that was Jason Kenney. That wasn't me. I won't operate that way. Well, as some people, I think it was Lowen, said recently, well, why didn't he speak out then? Well, it was obvious why he didn't speak out, because the minute you
Would have been joining Lowen on the other end of the caucus.
Exactly. He certainly wouldn't have been in cabinet, and it's only a short step after that to not even be in caucus. So, there are constraints there. Nobody knows it better than a former whip.
Yes.
The control that the party and the leader has over his caucus.
So, I mean, this, like the other one, is going to be a two-phase race. It's going to be who wins. I think that the regionalism is really to planned strategically to reach out to those members who were really alienated by the lack of action, or feeling of lack of action on Kenny's part. If it works, one of them is going to win. They get in. Now they've got 6 months, maybe a short session in the legislature. I think they're going to have to hit the ground running with some action but careful action if they're going to win the next election in spring. That's going to take some pretty good political acumen.
Yeah. And I would say, that hopefully whoever it is going to learn a bit from history. One is that you have to have a united team. So the first thing is to try to, heal the wounds that are going to develop during the leadership race. We've seen that time and time again, no more so than currently happening with the CPC race, where they're just sniping at each other constantly and dragging each other down. Hopefully we don't see that level in the provincial race. So the first task obviously will be to heal the internal divisions within the UCP. The worst case scenario is that, you know, if somebody wins that, like a Travis Taves that's viewed as sort of a conservative, that the Wild Rose folks say, well, to hell with that. That wasn't my guy that won, so I'm leaving. And that was part of the problem, I think, all along, where you saw people like Brian Jean that were highly divisive right from the get-go after Jason Kenney won the leadership. And so you've got that constant pressure and criticism, no matter what you do.
Well, we got a lot of, all the candidates, well, aside from a couple that you don't hear of, but the ones that we know of have some baggage that they're carrying, and in that sort of way. I mean, Danielle Smith, of course, made a catastrophic decision when she was leading the Wild Rose Party. That's definitely her biggest hurdle to try and overcome as she's coming in. I mean, she said it 100 times, and I think she's convinced some people, but some are still hesitant, that she's learned and realizes it was an error, and it's made her better for it. But a lot won't necessarily believe that. Brian Jean has been very divisive as well. I mean, he kind of stomped out the door once the leadership was over, and would he be more cooperative getting in? Michelle Rempel's now talking. Likewise with this federal race, with some of her poking on behalf of the Brown team, it's been pretty nasty from within. So they've really got their work cut out for them. I mean, sometimes the candidates you haven't heard of might have an advantage for some sour
the challenge, though, as you've already pointed out, Cory, and I can't agree more with you, is that for an outsider to raise that kind of money and meet those hurdles that they've put in place, you know, it's just, what, a couple months away, a month and a half, 6 weeks away, where they got to write those big checks to the party, is going to be a real challenge. I mean, I don't think that many of these people that are well-known names, for good or bad, as you point out, they have their baggage, but they also have the advantage of being a household name, have a better chance of raising that kind of money in a short period of time. So we'll have to see where that goes. But there's no question that these people are going to have to distance themselves from their own past. What we need to look for with all leadership races and all potential leaders is two key things. And you and I touched on it before. A leader has to have courage to withstand the pressure that undoubtedly will come, and they have to have judgment. Well, you just mentioned Danielle Smith. I think the big question still in a lot of Albertans' minds is, does she have the judgment to be our next premier? And that'll be the hurdle for her, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I mean, she's gathering some steam. She was well received on the show, but again, a lot of critique, a lot of questioning. When everybody makes mistakes, yes, but some mistakes are bigger than others, and it's so directly applied.
Yes.
So, I mean, and again, one of the things Danielle always talked about, I mean, another aspect you mentioned, though, is managing caucus, keeping them together then and united, whether it's Taves. I mean, he's definitely a contender for this. He's well established. He's got the baggage of being within the government, but he's personally never done anything untoward. If he comes in, though, he's going to have to reach out then to the alienated ones. He's going to have to reach out to Drew Barnes, Todd Lowen, even, Leela here. I mean, the list is fairly long of some outspoken caucus members that you can't afford to just say, well, you're out now and we're done with you. No, you got to pull these people in convincingly, or you are going to go into the next election with hornet's nest fighting within your caucus.
And I think that most of us recognize that, as I said previously, sort of the non-socialists, which I hope are still the majority of Albertans that don't believe in socialism of the type that's being peddled by the NDP, both provincially and federally. The non-socialist Albertans have got to feel that this is, regardless of who wins, that this is a team they can get behind, that this is a team that's united, that, as you say, there's room for everybody inside the tent, keep everybody pulling in the traces together, and we'll see where that goes. But if they don't do that, if they can't, there's an age-old thing that I'm often reminded about when it comes to political parties, and that is if they're divisive and they're seen as that they can't. It's like if you can't govern yourself, what would lead you to believe that you should ask, in this case, Albertans to give you the chance to govern them?
Yeah,
and that's the challenge for all of them.
And their timeline is tight. Well, I'm going to be, before I let you go, I will be interviewing all of them, I'm sure, over the course of this. I got 3 more of the leadership candidates coming up just next week alone, and I had Danielle yesterday. So what would you think I should ask them as a prime question?
Well, I think, for me at least, and obviously as the founder of the Maverick Party, the big issue and you got back to it with your mention of the Fair Deal panel recommendations, is that why is it that nobody has taken a look at the 5 constitutional amendments that I put forward as part of the Maverick platform, and actually to draw attention? It's not like we'll ever accomplish them, but draw attention to the inequities and the unfairness that Ottawa heaps on Western Canada. Nobody has mentioned that type of thing and said, okay, well, it's unlikely that that's ever going to be accomplished, but that's what needs to be accomplished if Albertans are ever going to be treated fairly. So, and the Fair Deal panel, another one. It's not enough that these people, and I question Danielle Smith in the sense of calling it a sovereignty act, because my belief is that as soon as you talk about sovereignty or separatism, you're going to lose people, right? If you talk about autonomy or some form of independence, and that's what I was trying to do with Maverick, was talk about the need for greater independence, and where we stop along the spectrum is up to Albertans and up to Westerners. You know, so you can have independence at various levels and enacting various things along the way from the Fair Deal panel, as an example.
Yeah.
But if I was asking them questions, I'd be saying, okay, what's your timeline? How have you prioritized what you're going to do? Like whether it's a pension plan, whether it's control of taxation, whether it's, you know, that you're going, as she has mentioned, there's certain federal laws she's going to say, you know, they shouldn't apply to Alberta. That's fine. How are you going to do that? And what is your timeline? Because one of the lessons with Mr. Kenney, as you say, was the disappointment that he didn't walk the talk.
You do have to follow through. Well,
Yeah.
We'll be lots to talk about and lots to watch. So thanks for coming in to talk with us today. I'm sure we'll talk again further soon as things
Well, I hope so.
develop.
Yeah, I always enjoy our conversations. Thanks so much,
Great.
Cory.
Good to see you, Jay.
All right.
I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. So yes, that was Jay Hill, and we talked all things political because, well, Jay's a very, I guess I said, seasoned political veteran. We can see that. There's all sorts of terms we can use for it. But and as a caucus whip, that was a tough balance. I'll corner Jay on that another time. With the Reform Party, you know, being as devolved and bottom up as it is, well, how do you even have a whip, and what are you supposed to do without ticking off the supporters while realizing that the party whip position still needs to be held and utilized correctly? So yes, always good to have Jay in and cover a lot of that. And the questions seem to come faster than the answers when it comes to these races. This one, as we said, is just developing and just getting rolling with the provincial one. I don't know how many of these candidates are actually going to make the bar and manage to win this race. It's a tough one to go in. So I suspect that not all of those 9 that we have at this point, if Michelle jumps in, are going to manage to get into there. But if they do, they got a whole lot of work to do. And that really cuts into the campaign as well. When you've got, you've spent that much money just to get in. You've only got so much to spend. How many mailouts can you do? How much advertising can you do? How much travel can you do? This could be a pretty subdued campaign, but we'll see. Let's see where else we go. Race. Yeah, there's a lot of cynicism out there on what's going to happen. You know, it's hard in politics. I get cynical enough and tired as well. It just feels like you're running in circles. But as I've said, you got to keep trying. You're going to lose if you don't. I use my analogy. Regular listeners have heard it enough times. It's like a video game, though. You know, except that there's no end. There's no princess at the castle. You don't win and it's finished. You win and you just go into the next battle. It just keeps going and going, and you try to just mitigate and do as well as you can. But there's no assurances that you're going to win. One year you win, another year you lose. But getting totally cynical and quitting, that is the guarantee of a loss. You're just not going to get there, and it's a real problem. Jet thinks Duke should run. Well, Duke, my dog, the wonder dog there, he'd probably do a better job than some of them. But, you know, we'd have to replace all the upholstery in the legislature after he tears it all to shreds. And, you know, there'd be some other challenges that come with that. All right, I'm going to speak before I get on to some more news stuff to wrap up this week. Let's talk about our sponsor again. And just a reminder, because that's how we pay our bills. It's how we stay independent. That's why we sit there and get on our high horse all the time and say we do not take tax dollars. We don't take subsidies, and we won't. We definitely won't. And that's through sponsors like Bitcoin Well, a good Alberta company, a company that will help you navigate the waters of digital currencies and safely do so. You know, it's not some online portal where you'll get a pop-up window on Facebook to tell you to some nameless person, faceless person on the other side of the planet, you know, what's going on. These guys are bricks and mortar on the ground. They got ATMs all throughout the West. You can have a free one-on-one consultation like any other type of financial advisor. Sit down with them and see if Bitcoin's right for you and how you would get involved with it and how you can use it, whether anything from a savings plan to paying your bills. So check them out, guys, bitcoinwell.com, and take control of your money. All right, let's see. Let's look at a little more of these stories and talk about a bit of, you know, I've been ranting about the accountability, the spending, the waste, the indifference, and that's what we've got going on. Marilyn saying happy Father's Day to all you dads. By the way, yes, it doesn't matter whether we're allowed to say it or not allowed to say it anymore. The ridiculousness going on. I'm sure some places calling it happy women who fill the role of Father Day or who knows what. It is Father's Day. It is this weekend. Say hi and, you know, talk to your dad if you can. And yes, getting back to the other stuff. Let's see here. COVID science remains a secret. This is one of the ones. The government caucus members on the Transport Committee blocked disclosure of this scientific data justifying the travel restrictions. Like, they're hiding it. Why? Because they don't have it. You know, a government that's told us this long, we're doing it for the science, clearly not. They're not. If they did, they would love to stick it in our face. If they could say, here's the studies that prove, that showed that these travel restrictions and mandates made people safer, they'd be trumpeting it from the rooftops. They'd be spending your tax dollars for advertising campaigns. They'd send a mail out to every person in Canada, say, see, we were right. Well, what are they doing? They blocked the disclosure of it. It means they don't have it. They lied. Not that most of us here are terribly shocked, but they're lying. And this was a NDP motion. You know, again, Trudeau says he's cooked up his deal with Jagmeet Singh, you know, where they're going to hold the government together until 2025. It's not going to last that long, guys. There's no way it's going to last that long. But, I mean, it's still going to last agonizingly long, no matter how it goes. But the NDP and members within it, not every one of those members are happy at being in bed with Trudeau's government. They're not thrilled with this either. They don't feel like being wagged around by a Liberal party. If they wanted that, they would have joined the Liberals in the first place. But either way, so they put a motion for it. They wanted, the NDP said they want to see all the relevant documents containing the public health advice and the modeling that supposedly the Minister of Transport, another one of Trudeau's real geniuses in cabinet, you know, so on those regulations like quarantining, masking, testing, all those things, the mandatory vaccination for travelers. Well, where's the science? Where's it at? Show us. Even the NDP is saying, show us. And they said, no, they blocked it. Not only were they not sure, they went out of their way to block it. The government is lying. They've been lying to you. They've infringed on our rights. They've kicking and screaming lifted these mandates, one of the last places on earth. And obviously they don't have the science to justify what they did. So it's going to fall apart. You know, I've talked about that before, that there's a judicial inquiry. It's going to take a year. But, you know, I hope, because we're seeing, as I said, we see Liberal appointed senators have been speaking up because they've had enough. And some Liberal MPs have said they've had enough. And just because a judge was appointed by the Liberals doesn't always mean they're going to be beholden to them. So the justice who was appointed to head the judicial inquiry into the invocation of the Emergencies Act, I really hope he does an honest inquiry, because it's going to rip the Liberal government to pieces. Their case is crap. It's crap. It's not working. And we need that exposed. He can get more information than parliamentary members can, or at least to a degree. And if they keep blocking and running interference, it'll look just about as bad. Let's see here. Just a long comment from Laird on how they limited who could run for UCP leader. It'd be virtually impossible for the average person, not just cash-wise. And that there are reputable, desirable, qualified people, and they've been blocked. Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I'm not happy with it. As I said, it reflects that change in the party. It's changed back so quickly to the progressive conservatives, to that elitism, to saying we just want a small circle of tightly connected people in order to manage these things. We don't want to let the unwashed in there. And we don't want to be like the Liberal Party. Let's see, the Alberta Liberals. Yeah, and I'm surprised they're asking 6,000 for people to run for the provincial Liberal leadership right now in Alberta. Khan, who was their last leader, managed to actually crush them down to a 1% support. Pretty sad end for the first party that ever actually governed Alberta. He just destroyed it. But they're asking like $6,000 to run for the leadership there, and I don't know if they're going to get anybody at that price. But my own view, I think 50 plus a 20 deposit, 70 can. I think that's reasonable. Other people might differ. Doesn't matter. That horse is out the gate. But I think a person has to be pretty serious to manage to raise 50 and go. And, I guess just keep putting the questions to the candidates then. See if they feel like they're going to remain true to the grassroots. I'm not blaming the candidates. They've got to work with the rules they were given. But I think most of those candidates would rather it was lower, because then they could use some of those dollars to campaign with and other things. They got better things they could do with it. Some of it, too, shows some people are saying it's a bit of desperation on the party. Leadership races aren't supposed to be fundraising races, at least not their fees. So the party, though, is another reflection of how badly Kenney has alienated the grassroots. I mean, their donations have been terrible the last few years in comparison to the NDP, and that's pretty sad, basically, for a government that's in power. Usually they can still draw donations just for the sake of people want to keep them happy. Let's see. More excuses on air refunds. So Transport Minister, again, Omar Al-Hagra. I always have trouble with his. He's rewriting regulations to give airlines more leeway in denying refunds for flight delays. I mean, the government's made an unholy mess of travel across the country. And they are now, they've infuriated the airlines, but they're trying to, it seems they're more content to screw the passengers than the airlines. So they're finding ways to tell the airlines they can deny you a refund if they've screwed you on your flight. It's just horrible, this government, with what they're doing. That's, again, the committees are putting the government on the spot with these things. Let's see, we got some other news to run through. Here's another beauty. Speaking of entitlement, speaking of waste. So, there's a $12,000 yearly bonus, basically automatic to the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation employees. Pretty much every one of them. How many of you get your $12,000 Christmas bonus? Well, if you work for the CMHC, on top of your massive government salary, on top of the massive bonuses, on top of the extended vacations, you get another 12 grand in bonuses during these days. When everybody else is tightening their belt, they get $12,000 bonuses. And what are they doing? This is the group that's constantly trying to find ways to tax the equity on your house. These are the ones that keep putting out those studies on behalf of the government, saying that we need to steal, and that's what it is. Taxation is theft. They want to steal the equity in your home, your primary place of residence. And the CMHC is constantly poking into that, as I said, on behalf of the government. That's who runs them. That's who puts them in there. And these clowns, I was going to say something worse, they get $12,000 bonuses on average, almost every employee. Now, the CEO of that, let's see, what's her name? Romy Bowers. Her salary is $459,000. She didn't disclose how much her bonus is on top of that. People, we're getting screwed. Yeah, these bureaucrats to put out these crappy studies and come and try and steal your equity are also getting a salary of $459,000 plus bonuses. Wonder why the country's screwed. And yes, it was the Canadian Taxpayers Federation who dug that one out as well. So from the outbreak of the pandemic, they paid bonuses almost $50 million. 94% of the employees apparently were qualified for those bonuses. A bonus should be when you do above and beyond in your job, when you're exceptional. I hate to say it, I've worked in enough workplaces. There's none where 94% of them are exceptional. And when you're looking in the government civil service, well, usually 94% of them are incompetent. If they were competent, they'd be in the private sector somewhere. Well, actually, they might be competent in scooping money out of innocent taxpayers, but it doesn't mean they're any good at their job, and they certainly don't have ambition to work for it. Here's a privacy bill. So the cabinet reintroduced a bill that exempts itself. So you see, the government came in with a way to protect people from data mining on their phones and things like that to a degree, which has kind of failed actually on a lot of levels, but they tried. They bill to protect your privacy, but they exempted themselves. They made sure the government, though, can still get into that data. We saw it used in the Emergencies Act, snoop on you, keep Well, they're putting another bill forward to make sure they remain exempt. So they still got plans to keep mining your private information on your phones. Just keep that in mind. It's another one of those bills, this flood of bills, that's C-27. Every bill this government has done in the last 6 months has been modeled on taking away rights. This is an authoritarian regime. It really is. All they do is always, whether it's trying to regulate the internet, regulating the media, taking away your firearms, now going after your privacy, as well as a bill in the Senate that was looking to go after, giving customs agencies the ability to read through your personal email, phones, and information. This country needs a change in a big way. And I mean, I know the Conservatives alone won't be able to do it, even if we get a Conservative prime minister, whoever wins that race. There's still, the changes are too big for that, but it would be less damaging than the current government. This government needs to be flushed out of there. Mitigate the damage. Got to. All right, that's enough ranting out of me. So let's, that reminder again, go to the Western Standard Online. We got the debate on again. It's going to be in July 8th at the Petroleum Club, and you can get there in person. It's only 300 seats, so that means, it's a pretty intimate setting, and there'll be a cocktail period afterwards where you could, meet and greet with some of those candidates after the debate and chat with them yourself. And just for $25. Like I said, you can get in and see the Peak Club. It's on a Friday, so you can, if you get out of work an hour early, you can catch that. It starts, I think it's going to start at 3. And as well, so Monday I'll be back. I'm going to have guests, former cabinet minister Rebecca Schulz. She's running for the leadership of the UCP. She's going to come on and talk about her platform. And Chris Oldcorn, our Saskatchewan writer and columnist, is going to come on. We'll just talk some more Saskatchewan updates and news. And I got a lot of guests lined up for the rest of the week as well. So you all have a good weekend, and I will see you all Monday morning at 11:30.